Well, I don't know how many years on this earth I got left. I'm gonna get real weird with it.
Hello, and welcome back to another installment where we get weird with it. And today I have great news for all of the fans of crackpot conspiracy nonsense, because Hans Wormhat, the Hans Wormhat, has discovered the existence of Tartaria. So, I thought, since it's Christmas, I'd bring you all this special little segment where we listen to Hans Wormhat talk Tartarian nonsense. What do you guys think? Yeah, so this is his channel, by the way. He doesn't go by Hans Wormhat anymore, but it's RFTKOHIAH. Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. And if you look right here, Taste of Tartaria. So we are gonna dive in. I'm ready for some weirdness. Let's go.
So I was recently talking to a friend about this subject, and she brought up something that I couldn't dismiss, and I think it's really interesting and probably true. And that is that we have ancestral knowledge, that there's just information that we're born with, and through, so now I'm just talking my own ideas on the subject, through propaganda, fake history, they try to not tell us our real history. However, I agree that we probably have an intuition or an understanding about our ancestors, about what happened in their life. It gets passed down whether you're taught it or not, in the same way that animals, so we're even above animals. So if this happens for animals, I think that this is a reason why it's probably true that we do have ancestral knowledge.
He's talking about like genetic memory, and epigenetics and stuff here.
That is just in us from our ancestors, in the same way that animals don't need to be taught things. They can, and I believe that there are examples where if a parent learns something, it just automatically can get passed on to the child. Well, I think that we have some intuition about Tartaria, and I think that maybe it's that intuition.
Now that's not untrue. There is genetic memory works to some extent. It's not something we fully understand yet, but having memory of like events and stuff like that is a little different than remembering that that red means stop. Or that's the kind of thing that you have genetic memory for. Like you have a natural red makes you take notice, like the color red, things like that. That's the kind of cool stuff that we do with our brains that we pass down, but not, oh, there was a giant tower built by man to try to reach God, and then God smote us and all that stuff, the Tartarian nonsense with the mud floods.
That speaks to us when we're being fed the BS about history that says, that doesn't sound right, or when we look at the Victorian era photos and we're like, that looks weird. Or when you see an airship and it appeals to you in some way. And I do think that
if you don't know about Tartaria, it was like this ancient kingdom that was like super advanced, like almost like Atlantis, but it was bigger. It covered like all the existing continents before the mud floods, which covered all the buildings and everything, and wiped out this ancient civilization. Some buildings that we use today are allegedly dug out of the mud instead of actually built in modern times. That's the Tartarian mythology.
It could be because our ancestors used airships, so we could have an appeal to that. And so how this fits in with Tartaria, just a few things that I want to say. This has just been on my mind. And I have a feeling that the public understanding of historical resets, I see people talk about it in just the most unexpected places, people mentioning historical resets. It's the cat's out of the bag, and I think it's just so obvious when it's presented. It's one of those truths that when somebody's put it out there, you can't put it back away. It makes so many things make sense. When you look at history through the lens of historical resets and Freemasonry, inheriting, when you understand that every time there's a historical reset, there's this huge inheritance and land grab, and they're all looking like thugs in the beginning, and I could go on and on. Anyways, let's keep it to the subject that I want to talk about today. Just two things: balloons and pigeons. We'll get to that.
Balloons and pigeons.
Balloons. I think it was the idea that I had about balloons. And
now we have a flock of pigeons that lives behind our house. They're super cute and kind of curious. So that's why this piqued my interest too. And one of my neighbors used to breed fancy pigeons.
this gets into technology. Technology is what we have, what's given to us, and low tech, high tech. A lot of times there's bias there, and today we think that what we have is the most technologically advanced. But something like a balloon, people automatically assume that that has to be lower tech than something like an airplane. But the thought that came to my mind is, well, in these cities, in my mind, Tartaria, these cities were once inhabited by a culture so far ahead of what we have today. And so things about the balloons, people, well, they're slow and they don't care. They lived lives of ease, and the technology that they had was...
So Hans has this idea of an ancient culture with just like dirigibles just floating about all lackadaisically across the sky. But there's no like evidence of this. He'll use like we've done the flying machine stuff here on Getting Weird with It before, but he will he appeals to that kind of stuff, like the Sakara bird and stuff like that.
To actually make life better. They believed in the opposite of things like planned obsolescence, and they built things to last. And they used technology to free the people from being enslaved. People weren't slaves. They had all the free time in the world to learn to play instruments, to learn to paint amazingly well. There was no concern about the rat race in the society. And so the fact that balloons are slower, it didn't matter. So to get to the point, I think it's a noise thing. I think that the cities, I think that it was probably legislation. They probably had legislation that said no airplanes in the cities, and you had to use balloons because it keeps the noise pollution down. And so I don't think it's an inferior tech thing, or that they didn't have airplanes. I think that airplane travel was only used outside of the main cities because of ordinances to keep the sound pollution down. Because these cities were just magnificent, amazing places to live, and they did not take their poop and throw it out into the sidewalk and stuff. Those are just the smear campaigns against the past. They got to sell you this story that the people in the past...
Yeah, he thinks that that they had indoor plumbing too, like these ancient times, these ancient cities
were wretched and low tech, and the opposite.
But for some reason, buildings built up into like the 1920s were built without indoor bathrooms or indoor plumbing facilities at all. Like they were still building houses without them. But no, he wants to make it out like, oh, all these old buildings had built-in bathroom facilities. No, they didn't. They didn't.
That is true. They used technology to help mankind, and they weren't enslaved by 9-to-5 jobs, and it was so much better.
Based, I want to live there, but it's a pipe dream. It's not real. It never happened.
So the airship thing, I think that it was mandated. I think that they had to use airships in the cities and around them because they probably thought airplanes were...
Nothing says this says great for navigating cities like a big bulky balloon moving through tall skyscrapers. That's not famously been a problem with parades or anything, right? That's not a famously difficult thing to do, to move balloons. And those are balloons that are tethered to the ground. Balloons trying to fly freely, because buildings and cities, the great little wind tunnels or little wind tracked ways that can just knock you totally out of the way. And then you get dozens of these guys getting tangled together trying to move through a crowded city. Imagine the jams. People getting cut in half by freaking ropes.
Loud and obnoxious. And they are. There's a flight path that goes right over my house, and it is obnoxious and constant throughout the day. So they have evolved past this. And I think that's just a truth that a lot of people have a hard time accepting, that what we have today is not the most advanced. There were societies that got to where we are today, and they said, we're not doing that. We're not doing planned obsolescence. We're not doing Facebook, Instagram. But they probably canceled all that stuff. Had a renaissance, a rebirth, decided to use technology to make people's lives easier and to not be enslaved. But I mean, we're not allowed nice things anymore. But Tartaria was probably the last golden age, and I don't think we're ever going to go back to that. What else?
Pigeons.
This is just a random thing that I think about all the time. How it's obvious that
get to the pigeons,
the United States of America in the previous reset, I think, was just like Western Europe. I don't think that there was any difference between the United States and Western Europe in the previous reset.
It's almost like the architecture and culture of Western Europe is what the United States was colonized by. That could be a possibility, couldn't it?
Or when Tartaria was alive and well, and life actually was a lot better. But who knows? I mean, maybe I'm looking at it through rose-colored glasses. Maybe they had the same issues. But I really do think that they lived a completely different life, where they were able to just explore artistic pursuits for most of their life because they didn't.
Are these rose-colored glasses?
And anyways, I think we can feel it. I think that's that ancestral, that feeling that we get that the Western Europe is this great force. I think comes from that golden era. And
are we doing the steak tartare jokes in the side chats? Yeah, there was another raw beef dish that I had raw egg on it. I don't remember what it was called. I'm not sure what that's called either.
I was saying something, but I got sidetracked. I think it's pretty obvious that the United
Pigeons.
States basically was like Europe. Well, we had Spain on the west coast, was owned by Spain, and you also had French influences in America. I don't think that it's the story that they tell us.
You don't know about the reset, left-handed Jedi? Yeah, we're living in like the 5th age or whatever. Last reset, there was Tartaria was the kingdom, and they got really, really advanced, blowing both Mu and Atlantis out of the water with their global empire.
I think that what makes a lot more sense is that it just used to be like Western Europe. There used to be a France in USA, in the Louisiana area. That just used to be like another extension.
That's true. It's called the It was French territory, Louisiana all the way up to the Great Lakes, most of Canada too.
France in some previous reset. The pigeon thing. I don't know. I've been seeing a lot of pigeons recently, and it makes me think about carrier pigeons. And this is another thing where technology, they want you to think of things as being low tech, but how cool, how sophisticated of a society that uses things like pigeons for sending messages. And is that really?
They're great, but they poop a lot. Trust me, because my pool is the only water source that they have, and within like a 20-mile radius, it seems like. So all the pigeons hang out here, and they make a lot of poop. So pigeons are fantastic for what they were doing, carrying letters and stuff. We actually did a video at Breeze Bestiary about pigeons because like we needed them and raised them so well and so specifically to do this specific function. And then when we didn't need them anymore, once we got technology to carry, messages and things, when we didn't need them anymore, we just kind of threw them out, and they're still there. They're still there hanging out in the cities. They still depend on us and think that we're their caregivers, and we treat them like shit. We treat them like pests, but we made them. We created them, and they're not a natural species. They were domesticated from rock doves in the Mediterranean region thousands of years ago, right? They're not a wild species. They're no more a wild species than a domestic cat is. Dave stung himself. Smooth. All right.
Low tech. It's actually, have you looked into carrier pigeons before? They need to take a pigeon that was born somewhere and then bring it to another place, because that pigeon will remember how to go home. And so that's how the carrier pigeons work. So it's it's something that takes a lot of setup. If you're going to set up a carrier pigeon route between two cities, well, you need to first raise pigeons in one city so they know, oh, this is my home. And then they take those pigeons to another big city. And again, this goes in with the silent thing. It's a silent technology, basically. Well, I mean, they're animals. They're not completely silent. I guess the point is, face value, you might look at something like a carrier pigeon and be like, oh, that's like a quirky thing. But in reality, it would need...
There were giants during the Tartarian era, and I think the people were supposed to be bigger. Like, people were just, like, bigger and, like, perfect. They were, like, everybody was, like, 6'4" and well-built. I work weekends in New York City, and the people are feeding the pigeons more than ever. They're so chubby and produce so much poop. Yeah, I imagine the pigeons in New York City probably live pretty good, all things considered. The ones in the park, especially. But people are cruel to pigeons just in general. Like us as humans, we call them, like I saw somebody say winged rats earlier, or rats with wings. Left-handed Jedi mentioned is the term that people will often put on pigeons to disparage them. And it's kind of funny because we made them. They're our responsibility as a species.
It's a very advanced society to decide to put in the effort to do something like this. And it matches what we see. It's a thing. The old cities, they
Taking
have
my rose-colored glasses
building on the top
off,
of the roof, and there's some weird guy that raises pigeons there. And anyways, I don't want to ramble too much in this video. These are just ideas that I have and that I think about. That
ramble away, Hans.
These are just little glimpses of a society that was just leagues beyond. what we're
We
at
are here
today.
for your rambling,
And
Tom.
that a pigeon isn't
Tom.
necessarily low tech. I don't have a
Hans.
picture here, but
I don't know where Tom came from. Turkey Tom, I guess. I don't know.
there's been really interesting like military applications of pigeons.
Right.
Using pigeons in like homing missiles, where they actually have a live pigeon inside of the missile that is making it guided. Very interesting. So just because someone uses a pigeon doesn't mean it's low tech. And apparently these passenger pigeons were so large in number, and maybe that has something to do with the reset.
So the passenger pigeons is not the same species, right? A passenger pigeon. So pigeons are a group of doves, right? Pigeons actually are called, I got hair stuck on my face, are called rock doves. Their ancestors were called rock doves. They're still around. You can still see rock doves in Europe. I think there's some rock doves in the U.S. now too, and on this side of the Atlantic now we've introduced them. But passenger pigeons were a distinct species, a North American species that was. They weren't the same thing as what you see now in the cities and stuff.
For a reset, there were just all these pigeons around, and they just got wild, out of control in numbers because they were just some human bred thing. And I don't know. There were some other interesting things about pigeons, fancy pigeons. What this reminds me of is the tulip thing. It takes an advanced society to have a mania about something like breeding intricate tulips. You're probably not a rat race society if the whole society is crazing. And
I'd like to introduce you to the post-Enlightenment Europe, or hell, even pre-Enlightenment Europe, post-colonialism. The aristocracy, they had all kinds of fancy menageries, and guinea pigs were another one, and they had fancy fish that we were breeding. Yeah, the upper class people and their menageries are where all this stuff comes from. All this fanciness, kings and sultans and
breeding tulips. And it goes back to the very first slide. Although who knows if that's damage control or what, balloon mania. They want you to think, I guess, that that people just like go manic all of a sudden and something becomes widely popular. And maybe it's just that they were more advanced than us and they had all the time in the world to do artistic things.
Hans might believe something like that,
pigeons.
Robert. You need to be careful saying things like that.
I mean, this one in the bottom right looks exactly like a city pigeon. They are pretty birds. The reason pigeons are often thought of as lowly is because they're in the cities. But even that's really interesting, that all the old worldy Tartarian cities have these same looking pigeons.
Because
they are beautiful birds.
That's where
It's very interesting that comes off of them.
That was their hub.
And they are doves. People forget that it's a dove.
Right, rock doves. Mm-hmm.
But the fancy pigeons reminded me of, the tulips, but also fancy rats were a thing, the rats that were bred, which is good. That is kind of interesting because were they like sewer rats from the cities that people started to breed as pets?
Sewer rats are not a species. Okay, so there's brown rats, black rats. Those are the two main species. Black rats tend to be to live closer to water than brown rats. But there's not too much difference in their behavior beyond that. I guess black rats climb better too. Regardless, there's not a species called sewer rats. So yes, all domestic rats are bred from brown rats.
Rats do make pretty good pets though. I've had them and very personable. And I mean, I don't support pets anymore, but it's just a lot of work cleaning up after them. My life's hard enough. But these people, they had all the time in the world to do these things. This was their life passion. I think that it was just a huge society of people that got to just live nice, easy lives because the society functioned how it should, and they used technology how it should, pneumatic. I think that this was a pneumatic society. And it goes with Tesla, too. Tesla was a post-reset.
Hans has made it clear that he is not part of the birds aren't real movement. He thinks the birds aren't real movement is a false flag to try to make his movement look stupid.
Guy
he is a flat earther, though, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, Hans.
To revive the greatness of Tartaria, and he wanted to bring it back. I think that that's pretty clear, too. I think that's how the Tesla puzzle piece fits in, that he knew about it. He knew about Tartaria and the electric cities, and he wanted to bring that back, and that was not cut out for this reset. Nope, we get the rat race, reality TV reset, going to the moon, sending men to the moon reset. Mm-hmm. We don't get the steampunk reality, but I think steampunk is true.
You believe that steampunk's real, but you don't believe we went to the moon. That's great.
That's in our genetic material passed down from our ancestors. To go back to the beginning, I think there is something to that. That's why this stuff clicks as truth. is because it's within us. It's our ancestors lived through that.
So our ancestors, we had steampunk ancestors.
Ecclesiastes.
Did Jesus live in the steampunk era? I'm not letting you read King James Version scripture. We're not doing that. But did our ancestors live in a steampunk world? Did Hans Wormhat discover the secret of Tartaria via pigeons and balloons? Let me know in the comments down below. This has been a short little segment of getting weird with it. Yeah, thanks for sticking around. Please remember to be kind, take care, and we will see you next time.